If you're thinking about upgrading your watch collection or selling something off to make room for something new, then you need to check out The Real Real.
A trusted platform for luxury resale. Their watch selection is serious. We're talking Rolex, Cartier, and many vintage gems.
And when you sell with them, you get up to a 90% commission. They'll even throw in a free price estimate so you know exactly what your watch is worth.
They also make it real easy. Their team handles photos, listings, customer service, and shipping.
And if you've got something like a Santos, a Calatrava, or even a Submariner, The Real Real might buy it up front, which means you get paid on the spot.
Your watch will be seen by over 38 million members who actually get luxury. So great pieces go to those who actually love them.
And every single piece is authenticated by experts with serious credentials.
Plus, first-time sellers get an extra $100 in site credit just for getting started.
So jump in and go to therealreal.com/WCP. That's therealreal.com/WCP and send us a wrist shot. Welcome back to another episode of Wrist Check Podcast. The dynamic duo is back together again. Allow us to introduce ourselves. My name is Perry.
And I'm Rashawn.
And this is WCP Weekly. Tonight we have a very special subject for you. We're going to talk about vintage watches, what to look out for, what to look into, best practices, and more. But before we get into that, we have to have our honorary wrist check.
Yes.
For those who are watching and listening, you know how this goes. As is tradition, we always start with the man who never repeats a watch. Sitting across from him, I can tell you, he is wearing a new watch. Mr. Smith, what's on the wrist?
Woo! So, I am wearing a new watch, guys. I feel like it's been some time in the making. Got to bring some of the new boys out.
Okay.
This timepiece is very special, as they all are. This one is very special to me because it was a gift.
Oh, nice.
So shout out to friend of the pod, Blake Ray of Lonely Wrists. He actually
shout out to Blake.
He mailed this to me because he knew how sentimental this watch to me is. And I am wearing the Timex 8-lap Ironman. Woo! Yes.
It's a heater.
It's a heater. This watch was specific to the Japanese market. Sold out fairly quickly.
I believe that.
I mean, price point is there, $100.
Yeah, it's easy.
Very easy.
Sorry, that was an elitist comment.
Right? They're gonna get you.
Yeah.
What's great about this timepiece is that it's actually the first kind of re-edition of this watch from the original from 1986.
Right.
They did a re-edition in 2013, but they said they didn't really get the specs right.
Okay.
This one is like a 1980s replica.
It's tight.
It's actually really nice. And now that I've been wearing it so much, I'm like, I should wear this a whole lot more.
It's funny because you got a look going on right now, too. I'm trying to figure it out. It's like triathlon, corporate boardroom.
Yeah.
This goes a lot of ways. It works.
Thank you.
It definitely works, but it's like I'm running a marathon and then I'm signing a deal. I love it. It's good.
You know what this reminds me of? Remember Ninja Warrior?
Sure, yeah.
When he used to wear the funny outfits and do the extreme sports?
Yeah.
I'm one of those guys.
Yeah. Well, because you got the running shoes on with the vest. And the watch, but then underneath you got, you know, the pants and the shirt and the tie, and it's something.
I definitely was going for a look, but I mean, I'm happy to have it. Reminds me of my dad and how I got into watches, and I mean, I couldn't be happier.
No, it's great. And I think the fun thing with those watches is always kind of like the colorway, right? Like it's a digital quartz watch. It's going to keep amazing time. It's super utility. You can use it as a chronograph, as a stopwatch, and some of them, you know, have other complications like world time, et cetera. But I think most people are just using it to tell the time, but it's incredibly light. The colorways are fun. If you are someone who likes to have fun with fashion and sneakers, it's a great accessory. And it's just a fun watch. It's a watch that you definitely can wear if you just want to wear a watch
Yeah.
and you don't want to think too hard about it. And
Hmm.
if you want to think too hard about it, you can like match it up with your sneakers and collect a bunch of them. And
Yeah.
it's still fun. It's a great piece.
Yeah.
I actually want one. I was looking at some of those recently. There was one that came across my feed. It was like the old school Charlotte Hornets colors.
Ooh.
So it was like that teal blue with purple and there was some gray in there. It was kind of
Yeah.
nice. It
That's
was funky.
nice.
I'm wearing an oldie but goodie. I'm wearing a vintage timepiece. I'm wearing my vintage Pepsi Rolex 16750. The gift that keeps on giving.
Hmm.
It's a gloss dial, great patina looms. Also the loom in the hands. Um, it's got that lollipop second hand, which I love. It's a 40 millimeter watch. Wears slightly smaller. Kind of feels like a 36. This is the Rolex that I saw growing up. This exact reference, which is why I went after it. We'll talk a little bit more about that tonight in terms of methods of collecting vintage if you want to collect. But that was why I got this. And I've had this watch for a little over a year. I almost sold it. I think I spoke about that before in a prior episode. And when I was actually getting ready to make that decision, I went and retrieved the box with the papers because I got this full set. And I realized that the punch papers were dated a month before I was born,
Mm.
literally just 1 month. And so I saw that. I was like, man, this is probably as close as I ever get to having a birth watch, which a lot of people chase. And for many, it's not a thing.
Mm.
But as it turned out, uh, yeah, that was the case. And I thought, man, maybe I should keep this.
You should.
And it's one of those pieces that I mean, it's a cool watch. It's iconic for me in terms of Rolex, and it's very easy to enjoy. But when you're not wearing it, you kind of forget about it, and then that's when you start to think like, man, what should I do with this thing? And then you pull it out and you wear it again. And you're like, that's what I should do. I should wear it more.
Yeah.
So I'm wearing it tonight. I'll probably wear it all weekend, but I'm gonna have fun with it. So
Yeah. What I do love about this watch, especially looking at it now, while that specific piece is so cool, is because the insert is not getting lighter; it's getting darker.
yes.
Which like it almost gives. I don't think I've seen like almost like a burgundy insert. It almost looks like it could turn burgundy,
Mm.
which I don't know, maybe from my vantage point, it looks burgundy, but I think it's pretty cool. Kind of like reminds me of like the new Tudor Black Bay
Oh, a little bit,
Coke.
sure.
How that like red is like a
It's
deep
like a little
red.
crimson. It's
Yeah.
nice. Um, it's one of those things too. Like the beauty about vintage, and we'll talk about it, is like there's so much variety. You can find things that are like unworn and unpolished and mint condition, and then you can find things that are like worn to hell.
Yeah.
Uh, and we've seen it all, but sometimes that can even be kind of cool,
Yeah.
right? Some of these watches have a lot of character and a lot of personality. And if you do enjoy vintage, I think part of what you enjoy is sort of the storytelling, or even the ideas that you tell yourself what the story might or could be
Yes.
from looking at a piece that is like worn excessively. And then there's a lot of variety in between. And so we'll talk a little bit about that tonight. But vintage watches is something I think are near and dear to both of us. We both individuals who've been collecting watches for some time, and I know I got my start in vintage. I'm not sure if you got your start in vintage, but
Yes.
yeah,
In luxury. In
okay,
the luxury watch game, yes. But I was always like Timex.
that's fair. I
Yeah.
think I was Casio,
Yeah.
G-Shock. Um, but when it got into mechanical watches, it was definitely vintage when I started spending sort of my own money on
Yeah.
it. And I think, when you get into vintage, It can be really scary. I know a lot of collectors who are terrified of getting into vintage because they've heard so many horror stories. And then we know many collectors who really don't like modern at all. They really kind of prefer vintage. And so there are various ways to collect, but tonight I think we want to focus on some specific categories and share some of our experience. Not that we're vintage experts. I certainly don't claim to be one, but I've done a lot of vintage watch shopping. I've sold vintage watches. And we work pretty closely and have some really great friendships with some people who are very well seasoned, very knowledgeable, and have taught us a great deal in terms of what to look out for and what to be mindful of when you are looking for vintage watches. All right, you guys, let's talk about something every watch collector can relate to. When you're on the hunt for the piece, you slid into DMs, combed through the forums, maybe even hit up a friend of a friend, and still nothing.
And that's where Bezel comes in. It's not just another marketplace, it's where tech meets tradition. Whether you're after a Rolex sub or independent grail, Bezel has tens of thousands of authenticated listings waiting for you. And if the watch isn't listed yet, no worries. Just add the model to your wish list and Bezel hits you with real-time notifications the moment something drops.
And for those of you who don't have time to obsess over listings 24/7, Bezel's got a concierge team that can source the watch for you. They basically take all the stress out of the process so you can just enjoy the watch on your wrist.
Plus for sellers, guarantee sales in just a few days. Thanks to the auction feature, it's a win-win, whether you're buying or selling.
So if you're ready to make your next move in this watch game, hit up Bezel, and trust me, you'll wish you'd done it sooner. So, I think the first one I want to talk about is, the term we have, buying the seller, buying the dealer. And why don't you break down, and from your perspective, what that means? I know it's a phrase people hear often, but maybe shed some light for us on how you define that.
It's actually one of my favorite terms that you mentioned in terms of buying the seller. And so buying the seller is almost exactly what it sounds like. You are buying from a seller that you actually have a little bit more of a rapport than just transactional relationships.
Right.
And so when you're buying the seller, you may be able to refer to this person for not only buying watches, maybe it's more knowledge, maybe, it's casual conversation. What should my next piece look like? Can you actually help me curate and take it a step further than just, checking in and checking out of, whatever you may be looking for?
Right. No, I think that's a great point. I believe in all of those things that you expressed. I think the checking in and checking out part is the major key for me, because I think the way that I define it is really like, and I hate to put it this way, but you kind of have to, you're buying a relationship.
Yes.
Right. And we talk about this often, at least we did in like the last two videos we did from like an authorized dealer perspective with respect to Rolex and Patek. But this hobby of ours that we love and we care about, it all really centers around relationships if you're going to do it right. And so when I think about buying a seller or a dealer, this is someone whom you trust, but also someone who values the relationship they have with you as a client and ultimately their reputation.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things I often tell people when they want to get into vintage and I talk about buying the dealer, and it usually ends with me recommending people that I work with because I do trust them. A couple of guys I've worked with for a while, is, I think first realize that mistakes happen. Anything can happen. Though some of these people may be experts and have years under their belt, they are not infallible and they're not exempt from making a mistake. Mm-hmm. So when you're buying a dealer, you're buying a relationship where this person is like, shooting 100% from the field. Everyone has made mistakes. The issue is, or the crux of the matter is, if a mistake is made, how will it be fixed? Will it be fixed? Will it be made right? And so when I'm working with a vintage dealer, the relationships that I prize are the ones that I know should something go wrong, I trust that this person is going to do everything in their power to make it right because they value their reputation.
Yes.
And that is the main thing.
That's spot on.
It is what it is, because if you discover that, maybe something is not, um, you know, listed accurately when you receive it, or there's some questions about whether it has been polished, because there are really good polishers out there and things have been polished very lightly, and sometimes you can see things and other times you can, and sometimes it's just a big question mark. you know when you're dealing with someone like this, obviously you trust their word, but you might also want to get it checked out from someone else locally, and there could be some questions around that. You want to be dealing with someone who is like, listen, if I don't feel confident about this, I can get my money back, or we can work something else out and get into something else. The really good dealers, 10 out of 10 times, are going to just say, hey, I'll give you your money back.
Yeah.
And that just is what it is. Like, let's not have any issues. But if you are unsure about this, I'd much rather value our relationship than for you to potentially soil
Yes.
my reputation that I built. Much rather give you your money back and we can try again, or you can shop somewhere else.
100%.
Totally fine.
Yeah, I mean, and also to that point too, something that's very interesting, and I know we'll tap into it, is that because the secondary market, especially in the vintage space, is very, very competitive, people that do sell these watches do come off as experts, but there is human error. There's some prices that you may see, or somebody, a vintage dealer, may sell you a watch that probably could be quote unquote overpriced. You have a conversation with them. You say, hey, listen, I really love the watch, but I feel like it's overpriced. They say, hey, you know what? Maybe I give you your money back. Or you say, listen, you've been buying watches from me for a number of years. Let's bake that into a cost of maybe another piece. And that kind of like helps
Sure.
continue
Or,
that relationship.
and just sometimes it's also part of the education process. Like, sometimes, you might see two watches um, that are almost identical online, and then you handle them in person and you can see very subtle differences, especially for someone who is not used to understanding why these things are priced the way that they are. If I see two identical Speedmasters from, I don't know, 1975, whatever, right? They might look the same online, but one of them might be polished, the other one might not be. That affects the price, right? One might come with, full collateral, the other might be a naked watch.
Yeah.
That affects the price.
Yeah.
One might have certain kinds of blemishes and the other one might not. That could affect the price. And it could affect the price in a number of ways, right? Because now you're talking about desirability, right? There was a while when like tropical dials were a thing. We know the tropical dial is nothing but a damaged dial.
Yes.
But desirable. And there was a time when they were incredibly hot, and they were so hot that if you had like a really awesome looking tropical or sunburnt, UV burnt dial, some guys will be willing to pay more for that. And there was a time where those prices skyrocketed.
Yeah.
And so there is a lot of variables. Speaking of that, I think the next point I'd like to touch on is condition.
Yes.
And so condition is a major factor in the variability of pricing. And so much to the point of, the tropical dials, same goes for the condition of the case, um, the condition of the bracelet, if it has all of the accoutrement with it.
I like that.
Yeah. Trying something new here. And so that also affects prices. And these are things that you want to be educated on and ask about. There's a number of resources that are available to you now, especially post 2020, when like this market in terms of information and media really started to blossom and bloom. Hodinky is an incredible resource. There are sites like Fratello. there
Time and
are
Tide.
Time and Tide. There are also articles written by vintage dealers. Our friend Eric Wynn, someone whom I've shopped with often at Wynn Vintage, has a newsletter that he sends out weekly, if not daily.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
oftentimes,
him and Charlie.
yeah, and so they plug in, new releases or watches that they put on the website, but they often like put in articles that are written either by Charlie or Eric, and Eric has lectures that he's given at the Horological Society that you can see on YouTube. And there are videos made by other friends of ours like Adam and Roman, and many of these guys are incredibly knowledgeable in their fields, and so there's so much information out there that I think sort of the best approach when you're looking to shop vintage is you really want to have an idea of what you're looking for, right? And I think the best practice is to be specific. So, though it's nice to look at watches in general and just say, hey, I just want to see what's out there, that's great. But I really want to encourage people who are looking to dive into vintage before you dive into vintage, know the references you're after, right? It helps to know the exact reference numbers because when you know the exact reference number, you can do much more specific research in terms of what it is and how that thing should be from when it was factory and the varieties of that model that exists today. And then you can start to do your research online and see how these the condition affects the prices, right? And this is incredibly important if you have vintage dealers that are accessible to you in terms of like them having a shop or a showroom. I encourage you to visit. These guys love to talk about watches. Um, if they're in the middle of a sale, maybe don't bother them. They can tend to get a little crazy. It's a squirrely bunch, but visit their shops, visit their showrooms, talk to them about watches, try on stuff, ask questions. You're going to learn vicariously through the knowledge that they've acquired on time, over time.
I think that's very, very spot on. When you think of condition, how I look at it, especially if it's a vintage watch, I'm expecting for it to be worn. And depending on the year, the era, and the provenance, I'm okay with that watch being scratched, maybe scuffed, etc. Now, if you're talking about a time period piece, maybe, I mean, shout out to Adam. Adam has had like, astronaut owned like Omega Speedmasters, unpolished, untouched. Now that Speedmaster, unpolished, untouched is more valuable to me than maybe if it was scratched. But now a normal Speedmaster that's scratched, I may say, hey, listen, I could care less. I'd roll with that.
Well, yeah, and that's a great point, right? So the main key there is also transparency, because these things do affect the prices. So if mint condition is important to you, then you're going to do a lot of research on what that looks like in terms of pricing and what is really out there. And that's where things get really crazy. You have to do a lot of research and you got to have some really strong relationships. But if you're open to maybe just, similar to myself, man, I really just like this reference, the 16750, and you just want that experience of owning one. You're not looking to have one that's maybe super mint or full collateral or maybe a variability, a variety of the bunch. You have some wiggle room, and you might be looking at pieces that maybe the dial is refinished, maybe the hands aren't original, maybe the bracelet's not original, maybe the bezel was replaced. Like, these are not necessarily bad things, so as long as you know about it and it's priced correctly. But you got to do the research and understand what the market looks like on these specific references before you dive into that. The next one, speaking of collateral, box and papers.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that kind of really annoys me a little bit. And it's not that I don't appreciate box and papers, but anytime I've purchased a vintage timepiece, I wasn't looking for it to have boxing papers. If it had the boxing papers, it just so happened to have
Yeah.
the boxing papers.
Yes.
But when you're dealing with vintage timepieces, yes, having the boxing papers in most cases will impact the pricing. Pricing is going to be a little bit higher. However, we do know that papers can be faked.
Yes.
And so when you're looking for stuff that has to have boxing papers, you may be overlooking other things.
Yes.
I would say, and I know a few dealers, not few, I think most all of the dealers that I know would agree with me in terms of vintage watches that condition is more important than boxing papers.
Yes.
Boxing papers are really like a plus, and really, from what I've been told, have only become a thing recently, like the last 10 or 15 years.
Yes.
Boxing papers, like it's got to have boxing papers.
Yes.
So if a dealer is selling you or is selling a watch, a vintage timepiece that's in an amazing condition, and it doesn't have boxing papers, and you think, maybe the price shouldn't be that way because it's a boxing papers, chances are it's priced because of the condition. If it's mint,
Mm-hmm.
no one cares about boxing papers. Boxing papers are really only important when it's like modern pre-owned watches.
Yes.
If the watch is
Less than a decade old.
Yeah, if it's less than a decade old, it should have boxing papers. Otherwise, it might be stolen.
Yes.
So that's like
Yes.
you want to look out for that.
Yes.
But if it's just like a 1960s Speedmaster with a beautiful dial, maybe it's worn, but the condition is fairly good, unpolished, sharp edges.
Yeah.
It's going to be on the higher side.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And to that point, I think, if you do get a modern watch naked, it's almost a homie handshake. Because if you think about, let's say, for example, brands like AP, RM, where they actually are tapped into their collectors, even Patek, for example, tapped into their collectors, know their collectors by name, face, etc. And maybe they are willing to, accept that you want to move on with the timepiece. There may be some understandings there. Or if you're, like I said, homie handshake, you're like, hey, Perry, listen, my watch is still under, my watch is still under warranty. Homie handshake, hang on to it. Warranty expires. I promise boxing papers or yours. But that's when you have an extensive network. And to answer that, when we're talking about the concerns of boxing papers over the past 15 years, I think it really has come from new enthusiasts because they don't know, maybe or aren't exposed to those era appropriated timepieces.
Yeah.
And so maybe when they go to their seasoned people, they're like, hey, listen, I can't give you the breakdown. What I will say, the smartest thing is make sure it has boxing papers and you should be good.
Yeah, boxing papers, I think, really only matter if A, you're going to sell the watch,
Yes.
and B, you got a good deal on it.
Yes.
Because in vintage, especially when you're dealing with seasoned dealers and the ones that are finding good stuff, you're typically paying top of the market prices. So there's not a lot of room to make a flip unless, you're really educated and you're getting into trends and you're trying to see things that are kind of ahead of the curve, and you say, man, if I could get into this piece with boxing papers now,
Yes.
I'm starting to see that it's kind of growing in popularity. I might be able to make, a multiple of X in 3 to 5 years if I sold it. And that might be worth getting into it now. That's a real thing. People do that. I've done it.
Yes.
I've bought watches at one price, some with boxes and papers, others naked. And then in a year, 2 years, flipped it and made some like really great cash.
It goes right on up.
You know what I'm saying? So that is a thing and that happens. But you got to really be dialed in to what other collectors are getting into. And it also helps to have a network of collectors, because many of those watches they ended up selling to people I actually knew.
Yes.
So they're, again, variables at play.
I want to share one personal story before we
Please.
move on, which actually is very relevant because my Vantage Reverso I got from the original owner, but
Right.
it came naked.
Yeah, it is.
It came butt naked. No, I'm joking. Well, listen. So it came naked, but it came from the original owner. And at that point in time, right, in 2007, this guy is clearly wealthy, buys the car, buys the watch, takes the box and papers, and probably throws it from the sunroof.
As a lot of people do. I know people now that buy watches and throw the boxes and stuff away. I'm like, that's crazy, but they're just like, I don't want it. It's a box.
Right away.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to kind of share like a personal story because it didn't stop me from buying the watch.
No, I mean that's a thing. If you know who it comes from, it is what it is. Also, it depends on the watch, right? Like, in all likelihood, that's not a watch that someone might try to steal off someone's wrist.
No.
You know what I'm saying? It's just it's not a piece that is like a super mainstream and recognizable. I think for most people that are not in the watch world, a JLC Reverso is a little obscure. I even know people who have confused it with Cartier. They just don't know. I think it is starting to have its time in the light, especially with the new piece that they dropped in at Watches and Wonders on like the Milanese bracelet. But it's still kind of very specific to enthusiasts.
Yes.
And collectors. All right, let's be real. Buying watches can be a little stressful. You're navigating through a sea of listings, wondering if that mint condition piece is really mint, hoping you're not about to drop some serious cash on something sketchy.
Into Bezel. These guys built a platform where every watch goes through an authentication process. We're talking old school watchmakers who know their stuff, checking every detail. They even smell the papers. And no, I'm not kidding.
And here's the kicker. Bezel isn't just for seasoned collectors. Whether you're spending $1,000 or $100,000, they've got a high-touch concierge service that will guide you through the entire process. You get a real human interaction, not some chatbot giving you the runaround.
And if you're selling, their auction platform guarantees a sale in days, not months. So whether you're adding or offloading, Bezel makes sure it's smooth sailing.
So next time you're eyeing that dream piece or looking to make room for a new one, check out Bezel. They've taken the hassle out of collecting so you can just enjoy the journey. Going back on originality, I think maybe we could talk about sort of restoration, finding out if pieces have been refinished. Case refinishing is a big thing. It's a big thing for me. It's a point of contention because I think case refinishing is. I'm kind of torn on it. I feel like case refinishing is very, very cool. And it's very difficult, and so thus is very expensive. And there are some people who do it exceptionally well.
Yes.
However, if you're getting a case refinished on a watch that has a tropical dial or patinaed lume, I personally take a lot of issues with that.
Yes.
Because it just feels fake.
Yes.
And I'm not entirely sure that I know that if it looks brand new and the dial doesn't or the bezel doesn't, it's to some it might look like it looks brand new and it's like, wow, it's a beautiful watch. It's probably not gonna sell for very much because originality is a big thing. And so in the vintage watch world, you often hear dealers say, this is unpolished or lightly polished because they know that it's more original. It's closer to what it was when it left the factory, even if it's worn, than you getting it refinished. And though now you've put it in a place where the condition looks great, we know that has added metals to it, and it's not the metal that left the Rolex factory, if you're talking about Rolex.
Mm-hmm.
And so in some eyes, it's no longer Rolex.
No.
And it is a very strange thing, but it is a real thing.
Yes.
So one of the things that I would say is, if you're shopping, and we'll talk about buying vintage watches online, if you're looking at watches online and they look pristine, but they're vintage, ask more questions. Be a little,
Skeptical.
be a little skeptical. A little skepticism won't hurt in that arena. It may save you some money.
Yes.
It may save you from making a big mistake.
Yes. I have to agree. And I think, to your point, case refinishing for me, I think almost the same as synonymous as having boxing papers. If the watch is within 5 years, maybe even 10 years old, and the watch has been refinished, I may not have too much of an issue with it.
Yeah, I think on a modern watch, and to refinish a case on a modern watch, I think would have to have been beat up.
Yeah. I mean, also too, let's just say hypothetically, maybe it doesn't have as much wear and tear, so you're doing like light polishing.
Yeah, totally fine.
Just to kind of like spruce it up. Maybe, you want to bring it back out for some kind of event. Maybe you do want to part with it and resell it. Maybe you want to give it to a friend. Maybe you want to gift it to someone.
Right.
At that point, I think that's where like refinishing is okay. When it comes,
But are you talking about vintage watches?
no, I'm talking about modern watches.
Sure. Okay.
Vintage watches, by all means,
Yeah, do not.
do not.
Because you're literally depreciating the watch's value.
Yes.
Now, if you're just like, I'm not selling this watch, this is staying in the family, maybe I'm giving it to my son or daughter, and this is a family heirloom, then who cares? It's your watch. Do what you want to do.
Yes.
Right? Like at that point, I think it's a great option.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's the kind of thing where, you might be concerned about the value and you want to retain that as much as possible, if you own a piece and you're considering refinishing, I would advise not to.
Yeah.
And even so, like with certain brands, I wouldn't even send it to them for servicing. There are some brands that do it really well. I think in most cases, Patek is great. Vintage timepieces, I probably would not send it to Rolex. I even heard a story. There was a gentleman I met recently who purchased. He wasn't even really a watch guy. He's just now getting the watches, though. He's had watches for years. Anyway, he got a Daytona in the mid '90s. I think maybe late '90s. He said he paid $2,000 for it, which was expensive at the time for a watch, and especially a Daytona, because he was like, no one liked the Daytona, but he wanted a Rolex, and he bought the watch. He still has it. He sent it recently, to get polished. He wanted Rolex to polish it. They actually did him a favor when I think about it. So Rolex, his words, contacted him. They said, "Hey, the bracelet is an issue, and we need to replace this bracelet." And he said, "Well, I don't want to replace the bracelet because, this watch means a lot to me. I've had it for a long time, and I'd like to keep the bracelet. Can you just fix the bracelet?" They said, "No, we have to issue you a new bracelet, and then we have to keep this one." Because for anyone who services Rolex, if you know now, they don't give you those things back anymore. There was a time when they used to. If they'd replace a dial, they'd send you your original dial back, bezel, bracelet, the whole nine. Now they don't do that. If they've replace anything on the watch, they keep the original piece. And so he was like, "Well, no, I don't want you to keep the bracelet." And they said, "Well, then we can't service it." He said, "Fine, don't service my watch." And he sent it back. And when I spoke to him, I said, "Well, thank God you didn't get to service it because, you wanted to get that watch polished." I was like, "Do not polish that watch."
No.
He's like, "It's all beat up and scratched up." I was like, "Have you ever polished it?" He was like, "No." And I was like, "Trust me,
No, you don't want to do that.
not polish this watch."
No.
But also, you want to maintain as much originality as possible to retain the value. It's not, universal law, but it is kind of become like cultural standard within the vintage watch community.
Mm-hmm.
And so because that is what's desired, that then becomes the demand. And so that's what increases the value. If that's what people are looking for, the minute that they know that this thing's been tampered with, the value depreciates.
Yes.
And so you want to be mindful of that. And on another point, really just poor customer service on behalf of that brand. I hate the
Yeah.
fact that they're telling people what they can and cannot have as it pertains to servicing their watches. But we'll save that for another episode.
Yes. And to that point, before we move on, you're looking at brands now moving into certified pre-owned programs. So Rolex has a CPO program. Breitling now has a CPO program. I mean, there's been talks of many brands. Moser at one point was hinting at the idea that they kind of like put the kibosh on that, maybe for now, but you're starting to see brands stepping into CPO, and they are getting vintage pieces. And for them, if their golden standard is to have like new products sold secondhand, there will be very like special pieces that to vintage lovers we would say would be ruined.
Yes.
And maybe if you're buying, a Rolex certified pre-owned, maybe you're looking for things that are a little bit closer to modern, because if you're looking at vintage, it can take away a bit of that soul.
No, it totally does. And I mean, I want to be fair also to Rolex. I understand, as it pertains to that brand, I understand their standard.
Yes.
And, their gold standard or whatever they want to call it. But I get it, the fact that we want all of our product to look like they just left the factory. I think that's not only incredibly ambitious, I think, just on paper or black and white, that's kind of amazing. However, this community, this industry it's incredibly nuanced, and it's evolved in all kinds of ways. And one of them is, there is today a vintage watch community, and they're big and they're loud and they ought to be respected and they should be valued, because that also brings a lot of credibility to the brand, right? There are lots of people that are getting introduced to Rolex or Patek or AP or whatever via vintage. You know what I'm saying? And it is incredibly special and it's incredibly magical because, to the point of going back to this watch, the watches that Rolex sells today, I did not see those growing up. This is what I saw growing up. This to me was Rolex. And this is what made me fall in love with the brand. That period of product that they were releasing. It's not to say that that product was better than what they're producing today. Fact of the matter is, it is not. These pieces are not anywhere near in terms of the quality that they're producing today. The watches Rolex produces today are incredibly robust. They're tanks. You can beat the crap out of them and they still go. It's incredibly impressive. But for me and people who enjoy vintage like me, this is incredibly more romantic, right? And this was my introduction to the brand. And this is what I love. And I think there's value there. And there ought to be value there on behalf of the brands. So I would be in favor of them not messing with the stuff because I've heard some really horrible stories. And at least Rolex takes the position to actually speak to the customer and let them know. Because I know of other brands that have just changed stuff on customers' watches and not told them. Then it's just a surprise and everybody's upset.
Yeah.
And that sucks.
I agree.
Big time.
Big time.
So buying online. This is buying vintage watches online is very tricky. I don't recommend it for most.
It's not for the weak.
No. If you were to ask me personally, like as a friend to a friend, I'm just going to direct you to the people that I work with because I trust them.
Yes.
But when people start sending me like pictures of vintage watches online, just random stuff, if I don't know the dealer, I personally can't stand by it. There are some cases in which I do, and so then it depends on like the piece. If it's like maybe something that's not really desirable or something kind of obscure, I know the likelihood of that watch not being as described is probably pretty slim.
Yes.
Because there's no incentive to mess with it,
Yes.
right? Um, Additionally, you know, if you're looking at watches online, um, it depends on who you're purchasing from. We work a lot with Bezel. We had Quaid on the show. That episode will either appear before this or after this, but eventually you'll see it. And the system that they built over at Bezel is actually really, really impressive. And there's an authentication process built in, similar to our friends at The Real Real
Mm-hmm.
and companies like eBay. Though I tend to think you'll probably get better service from companies who are smaller
Yes.
and specialized in it.
Yes.
But you can always, I would recommend going to sites like that where there's sort of like an authentication process so that this third party who's listing the watch will see the watch before you receive it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just an extra layer of sort of protection
Mm-hmm.
and caution on your part because you don't have to talk to the random seller,
Yes.
right? Which can be awkward. And then also like they're incentivized to get this watch out of their inventory. So you don't know them from a pan of paint. They could be disingenuous. They might just be, very salesy.
Mm-hmm.
You might not feel comfortable speaking with them and asking them questions. Maybe you're not as knowledgeable as you should be when you're trying to get this timepiece and you don't know the proper questions to ask. Well, that's when other companies like Bezel and our friends at The Real Real, depending on what it is, can kind of step in and guide you along that process.
Yes.
And you can feel comfortable asking them the questions that you need to ask because at the end of the day, they're just providing a service, the authentication. It's not their watch. They're not selling it, but they want to make sure that you have an amazing experience because they want you to come back and use their platform.
Yes.
But there's some of those other sites where it's just like, you don't know what you're looking at. I'm not going to say their names because I don't want any smoke with them. But there are some sites out there that I just do not recommend using
Yes.
for
Yes.
buying vintage timepieces.
Yeah. I have to agree with you too, because while you were speaking, I'm thinking about so many websites that go ahead and loosely use the word verified.
Yeah,
And,
it's very loose.
when you think of buying online, I think it really comes back home to the top when you talk about buying the seller.
Yeah.
And so if you ought to buy online, you do want someone that you can refer to make it right if it's not right. Secondly, there are so many people in the marketplace that maybe do good business, but because they aren't verified or they aren't loosely using certain predatory terms to actually say that they are who they say they are, it can get very difficult. And so if that is the case, you do have seasoned collectors to look to. You do have trusted marketplaces like The Real Real, like Bezel, like eBay, Chrono 24, right? Chrono 24 has a bit of like a verified and non-verified. They do have more protection in terms of some situations. You do hear of those nightmare stories. Things do slip through the cracks, but you want to at least make sure if you're buying online that you do have some kind of decorum or a position to hold somebody accountable.
Yeah, you just don't want to be in a place where you're sending cash to like a random stranger you don't know in West Bubblefuck or something. Like,
Yes.
because you don't even if you're going to get the watch, you might get a box with a rock inside. Like, for
Oh,
being
we've
honest,
heard.
there's been a lot of that. So you just, you want to make sure, when you're buying online, you're looking at credible places. But also, the cool thing is though too, when you do start working with dealers, you realize that these guys have extensive networks. And oftentimes what you can also do, let's say you see something online and maybe it's something that's incredibly rare or really obscure and you want to go after it. Maybe this is the only chance that you have. Um, you'd be surprised the tentacles that some of these guys have. You can show them and they might be able to get in touch with the person and they'll know the questions to ask and they can broker the deal for you. Now that's going to come at a price. I can't say what that price is, depending on the timepiece and the legwork and effort that goes into it. It could be a small nominal fee. It could significantly increase the price of the timepiece. It's really difficult to say, but the option is there.
Yeah. Can we tap into value retention?
It's all yours.
Because when you mention that, it like stuck in my. I'm like, for people that are new to the hobby and they go, oh, Rolex watches. I hate it when they go, Rolex watches go up or watches go up when you buy them. And I hate when I'm like, don't say that. But I think that because you have so many seasoned collectors that are so impressionable on new ones, they're looking at the veteran formula and thinking that it works the same way.
No.
And it's like, it doesn't work like that, son.
It doesn't work like that, son. No, it doesn't. Well, it's the modern watches are more volatile.
Yes.
Like I remember, like the Batman all of a sudden is hot again. Like, remember the Batman went up to like what, 40K?
Yeah.
On the aftermarket at one point. It was between like 30 and 40K. Then it went down to, I think it got as low as like 16,
Yep.
15. Now it's at like 20 again.
Yep.
Why? I don't get it. I have no idea.
I couldn't tell you.
Couldn't tell you. I had a Sprite. I remember the Sprite was 30K aftermarket. It retails for 12. I sold mine for 15, like 15.5. Which means the person I sold it to probably sold it for around 18, 19. I think at that point it was going for like 19 when I sold mines. And now it's at 16. So, and that's the thing too, like if you're selling watches, the dealer's got to make money. You can negotiate, but for a lot of people, if it's like, oh, I sell it at 15 and this guy sells it at 19, I got a problem with that. It's like, you're perfectly within your right to negotiate, but you can't resell your watch to a dealer at the top of the market. There's no room for margin.
Also, too, think about the math. Guy buys your watch at 15. He sells it at 19. Who won?
We both did.
Exactly.
We both made a profit.
You both made a profit.
And now he's taking more risk at that point, right? Because there's no telling that watch is going to continue to go up. He might have bought it at 15. It started selling for 16 not shortly after I sold mine.
Yeah.
So he could have only made $500.
There's some dealers that turn around and they may actually ask clients that they sold watches to if they could buy it back because they can actually sell it for where the market is now.
There are dealers. Even Eric Wynn was on our show talking about, I remember the first time he sat with us when AP was really hot, he bought into, I think it was a perpetual. I'm not entirely sure. He bought into it really high. And, he was like, yeah, I'm going to make all this money. And then week goes by, and he sees, that the prices are falling on that watch. And when he sold it, he ended up taking a loss.
Yeah.
A big loss. But many of these guys, they're really taking a lot of the risk.
A lot of the risk.
You know what I'm saying? So it's interesting, but I think the world of vintage watches is a lot of fun. The fun part about it is really being able to do the research, is really being able to do the history. And that's something that I enjoy a lot. Even with modern watches, anytime I buy a watch, I have this thing where I have to research everything about that watch.
Yes.
You know, I'm looking into it before I buy it.
Yeah.
But then after I own it, I want to know everything about it.
Can I I'm putting your biz out there. I'm sorry.
Oh, God.
You will show me photos and ads of watches that you own, which I seem to I admire that a lot because you actually do dive into what you enjoy,
I do.
which is funny because a lot of these guys will buy these watches maybe for the flex or to say they have it, but you say, "Hey, tell me about it," and can't tell you anything about it.
No.
Or you say, "Tell me how to set a GMT." Guy can't set a GMT.
Yeah, no.
Guy comes in, goes, "Hey, I'm looking for a Daytona." Can't point one out in the lineup.
Mm.
It's very weird.
It is. That's the beauty about this hobby, though. You know,
Yeah.
people are allowed to enjoy it how they want. And, you know, as annoying as it can be, there has to be room for the hype beasts. Because believe it or not, and whether we want to admit it or not, they really do move the needle.
Yes.
They do. The hype beasts, the hype collectors, they're the ones that make this all possible. Their their impulsiveness
Oh yeah.
their impulsiveness to flex, to buy, is what makes a lot of it possible for the guys like us who are doing the research, building the relationships, to be able to get in and out of watches in a way that allows us to experience more watches.
Yes.
Because truth be told, you know, I'll speak for myself. The reason why I've been able to enjoy as many great watches as I have is because I'm buying into things I like that I believe will sell for much more than I paid for it. And sometimes I've taken losses, but oftentimes I've made a profit and I've been able to roll, you know, a watch into a larger watch, into a larger watch, into a more expensive timepiece. And that's afforded me the ability to experience so much variety as an enthusiast. And that's only possible because people are willing to pay those prices that you ask.
Yes.
And so shout out to all the hype beasts. I love you. Keep going crazy over Rolex, Patek, and AP because I'm gonna have more stuff to sell you. So
Keep them coming.
keep them coming. This was a lot of fun.
Yes.
I want to encourage anyone out there watching or listening to maybe hit us with some questions. I think it would be cool if we followed up sort of these Wrist Check Pod Weekly episodes with maybe like a Q&A episode for people that had questions about some of the things that we're talking about. So hit us in the direct messages on Instagram. You know, drop a comment on the YouTube, drop a comment on the Spotify. You guys know where to find us. We're on those places, also on Apple Podcast. And we'll see you in a week. Deuces.